Maximum News is a political satire podcast. The views expressed by the hosts or guests do not necessarily represent the views of the network or our sponsors. Also, it's very hard to talk about people like Ted Cruz without saying lots and lots of swear words. So maybe don't listen with the small little children persons. Welcome to Maximum News, everybody. My name is Michael Zampino.
And I am TJ Clark.
It's been a rough week. We are coming at you a little early this week. We had to adjust our recording schedule, not because of the events of the week, but because of, life stuff. But, I guess we just got to start with the biggest story of the week, and that is yet another school shooting.
Yeah, that happened on Monday.
In Nashville?
Yes. We're recording this on Thursday, so it's been a couple days since then. If you're a new listener and don't know, I work in the media, so I've been working in morning news. We've been covering it. I've seen it covered from national and local, and then even got to see how our station in Nashville covered it, like the morning after.
Your affiliate?
Yeah, our affiliate. I work for everyone's owned by someone, and our people who own us own a lot of stations. So
right.
And it's cool to have that benefit. We have their resources, they have ours. So I think a lot of times, like the day it was happening, I think we put their station on our program for a while too, just to because they're getting like the freshest information, and that's what we as a local media can provide. It's like putting this stuff live.
Sure.
For you to watch on the old TV or wherever you're watching.
Yeah, it's like we could watch it and then tell you about it, or we could just show it to you as it's happening.
Like that's the cool thing. If you're not a local news watcher, like it is different. Like there's more. That's the kind of benefit of like these connections with these like huge media things. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about.
No, but it's okay.
Yeah. So we don't need to like fill you in on the details. I'm sure you've heard probably also by the time we're recording this, by the time you listen to this. This is when the story is fresh like this. There's new information coming about it every day, and there's like new opinions about it. There's always someone saying something. Of course, someone said something immediately as it's happening. There's tweets from Congress people.
Oh God, Marjorie Taylor Greene coming out and basically saying that it's not the guns, it's the hormones and the testosterone. She came right out and said that because this one shooting was by a trans person, that we better not ever blame it on guns again.
Yeah. That's right.
Which is just one of the most. Number one, it's insanely insensitive. She's a bigot and a monster on a whole nother level, and
yeah. And like it really comes out like those moments when.
But she has always been fiercely anti-trans.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's very mean about it. She's super nasty about it.
Yeah.
And she jumped the second that I heard that my wife and I were watching the news together, and the second we heard it was a trans person, we immediately looked at each other and said, "Fuck."
Yeah.
Because we knew that this was just going to be ammunition for so many hateful people to blame it on the person being trans.
Mm-hmm.
And therein goes to a little bit of what you and I were talking about before we started, which is, how much of the media, how much responsibility is there on the media to help us understand things like motive? And that goes to the sort of how each of these crimes has very, very specific differences from one another in the both the people that do the crimes.
Yeah.
You know, each one of those is very different people for the most part.
Oh yeah.
Some exceptions, meaning that there are a lot of white men, but
whole lot of white men.
But you know, their motive is often very, very different.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of very different motives.
Yeah.
You know,
Different ages.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Virginia Tech to Unabomber to Timothy McVeigh to, I mean, Unabomber and Timothy McVeigh have some parallels, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You go to each specific one and there's a lot of different things, but the common denominator is always the same. And that is weapons of war being readily available to anybody and everybody.
Yeah.
And it's just insane.
Yeah, that's watching it. Watching the story unfold is fascinating because of just what we can, the information we can get, and you know, the media is so thirsty to get. I say the media is thirsty. It's just our job now. Like everything is so out there, so fast. You know, so like, you get information like, you know, as soon as the person's name came out, you find out how many guns. You can find out information about their guns, and I love like
Right.
one of the very first things I heard about it was that like, oh well. Two of the guns were, or I think the cops even said, like, two of the guns were purchased legally. And,
Right.
And that was we talked some.
Didn't we find out that they were all
They were all. I think as of this recording, and they've since found out that they were
all legal?
Yeah, because
Legally purchased.
They didn't have all the guns on them. There were some guns at their home too, and even those were bought legally.
Legally
Like,
as
they had
well.
a lot of shit. All of them bought legally in Tennessee, from what I understand, who has, I assume, similar laws to Oklahoma.
Yes, and they were literally. I mean, you know, we're going to release this the last day of March. You know, as you're hearing this, if you're listening to this, say Monday, the Tennessee legislature may very well be back in session, debating a law that will make guns more accessible and easier to get legally. And if they do that right after this, then you really, really, really know where the priorities are, because this is insanely You know, reasonable gun laws are insanely popular with even responsible gun owners.
Yeah,
Even gun owners, for the most part. You know, it is the very, very small fringe group that is completely against any and all of these gun laws.
Yeah.
And, you know, that fringe, unfortunately, a large contingency of them are elected officials. And but their priorities are because of their pockets being lined by the gun lobby. Whereas the other folks are just, you know, so gun obsessed that the idea of, you know, them maybe having to go through a background check.
I don't.
If you know you couldn't pass a background check, you're against those laws. Is basically what I'm getting at.
I don't understand the zero restrictions, right? Because it does not take
Permitless carry is the most insane thing I've ever heard of.
Yeah, because it doesn't take much analyzing at all to see a person unwell and then commit a shooting. You know, like, so hold on, like in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, the closest we've had to like a kind of very public mass shooting was the shooting at the hospital,
St. Francis.
Yeah, that in that instance, the man who shot the doctor bought the gun. Like, I remember if it was the day of or the day before, but
he was
in a lot of pain.
I think it was within 24 hours.
Yeah, he was in a lot of pain. He tried to reach out to the doctor's office. He didn't like the news he was getting. He was just like losing his mind in pain, and then like bought the gun and shot him the like very next day. Or again, I forget the details, but again, it was like this man who was in like physical pain was able to walk in and buy a gun. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just something. There should have been something in that clerk or something in a law somewhere that says, you know, when you see someone in that kind of a state, I mean, I don't know, because I think I feel like I was going down the wrong road there, because that leads to a lot of personal, you know, being very subjective and whatnot. But if there are laws where you cannot buy a firearm and get it immediately without having to, well, didn't they used to have like a cooling off period or whatever?
Yeah. Anything.
They got rid of all of that stuff.
I think I heard in this story in Nashville, like even a red flag law would have came in effect because there was a history of them having mental illness. So
the fact that there are guns on the shelves at Walmart,
yeah, and you can walk
someone could buy right then,
yeah,
and not have to wait for some sort of information to be checked to make sure that they're chill to have that gun. That's just insane to me.
What I also don't understand is, I know like guns aren't, it's like this issue is so complex. Like guns aren't the only thing, right? There's so much at play here. But the fact that they won't even it's like it's happening because of guns, right? We have sick people, we have guns.
Well, the most I was going to say,
which one? You take away sick people, you still have guns. Well, and but you take away guns, you have sick people who don't have.
The other problem is
that hurts. I mean, we can get into that.
You're absolutely right. But the people that argue often that mental health, that it's mental health, not guns, those very same people are constantly voting against funding more mental health.
Yeah, exactly. That too.
So that doesn't work.
So again, it can be attacked from so many different sides, and it should be. But like, I think that like the fact that there's so much resistance on even slowing down, like even if you can just make like someone who's fucking hot-headed for whatever reason, make it hard for them to buy a gun in the moment of passion, right? Everyone understands like fucking crimes of passion and people losing their mind at certain fucking times. And I don't want to be able to buy a gun when I'm in, if I'm ever in a peril like that, just that alone like seems a pretty sensible thing. But anyway. Getting carried away. No. But there's a lot here.
All relevant.
Yeah, and I do want to go back and talk about like how the coverage was.
The media coverage, yes, please.
To me, that is itself like tells a story, because this story in Nashville is so interesting from a number of different angles. You can look at it from the gun angle and how easy it was for them to get guns. You can look at it from the mental health angle, and of course there's the trans issue. And for me, it was interesting looking at it from the media, because I get to watch this stuff like when I'm working and it's happening. You watch it in real time, like you're there watching as like information comes down, as information is confirmed. We're on the air with it, and then like I'm watching national news, and then like you just kind of, when you work in news, you're there for hours. Especially in my job, I'm in a control room where I'm just like watching everyone, the competitors. Like you just kind of get to see like how everyone covers it, and when it's going down, there's barely any information. And the only information you're getting is from the police, basically. Some people are like, researching if there's, was there any postings about, there's like journalists might be like searching for their own answers like ahead of the police. And that's great. And people find out so many amazing things.
Yeah,
like
that should be happening.
Yeah. But for the most part, when you're talking like as it's happening live,
real time,
the media, and you want the media to have like a trusted source, right? Like,
sure.
And we don't have the resources to have our own investigative journalists like hitting, the internet, making phone calls. Even like sometimes we do. We have enough, like we can pull it together for storm coverage and things when we need to.
Right.
But like these local stations aren't, so they lean on the police. They just rely on the police. So
I was going to say I hesitate to think of any local station that would, there's not a lot of local stations that would have the kind of funding to do.
Yeah, and there's some newspapers are still doing it. There's some independent groups. The Frontier does really great investigative journalism. There's and then the stations have a few investigative teams, but they're usually kind of like consumer type related stuff.
But even then, I'm sure they're struggling with funding and being able to do what they'd like to be able to do, or
Yeah, but there's still the question of, and journalists, and this is again a great time to ask the question, because when your only source is the police, there's a lot of questions.
Oh yeah,
because this is information as it happened, as I remembered it. Like the police issue a statement, right? They know the name of the shooter. They give the name of the shooter. The name is a female sounding name. They say the shooter identified as trans. The police said that, so we know that. And then they continue to say she.
Right.
We see the video. They release video. We see the shooter as very mask presenting. Looks like your typical white man school shooter.
Yep.
And then like, oh, so this person's trans. I mean, the police have said that, So they're clearly like So there's confusion already, right? Like, so
Right.
like in the media, and no one knows. And this is happening like the day of, right? So you're hearing everyone's using what I believe now is their dead name, from what I understand. So they're using their dead name immediately because the police gave that. And they're saying
Yes,
she.
we believe that he went by Adrian.
Adrian, yeah. And I've only learned that from TikTok. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen if it's confirmed that Adrian is his name. I haven't seen that anywhere else but TikTok. And like, I know that TikTok is not always like a reliable source, right? But when you see enough of it and you follow, there's some respectable journalists on TikTok. There are people
right.
who like, they have some credibility and like they're not out there like spinning misinformation. So again, when this comes down, there could be something more confirmed, but it definitely seems obvious that they were trans and they were he, him, and their name was Adrian. And then it matters. And like again, first and foremost,
even Reuters is using the dead name.
Yeah, so
in
the
story yesterday.
So that's fascinating. So, but like again, I think that they leaned with that immediately because that was what came down from the police, right?
Yeah.
If the police had come out and used he, him, and used said they were trans, you know what I mean? Like if they, I don't know how they identified the shooter. If they identified them through identification on them, like how the police got their name. I don't know all that. Like. I'm just trying to point out the fact that like when the police are leading the information, they've immediately like led the discussion, and now
absolutely
the entire media of America is dead naming this person. And I know that the shooter should not be the main focus of this, and that's another point I want to make now. Like the victims in this should always come first. Like I think, and a lot of media did a great job at this. Like as soon as the names start getting releasing the names, you hear from.
Well, here's another one. The Independent, UK, also using dead name, but this article says that the manifesto, they are planning to release at least portions to the public.
Interesting.
Once it's cleared by the FBI.
But okay, that makes sense. But like this story and this discussion should always be, about the victims first. I think that like that can get lost in the story, oddly enough. But some media are doing good about. Immediately, like
you said, that narrative pushed it towards it being about the shooter first.
Yeah. So and the confusion of it, like there was so much confusion of it. So even in our newsroom, like as it's happening the day of, they didn't know what pronouns to use and whatnot. I did watch the coverage of the Tennessee station when I watched Nashville. This was the day after. When again, not much was known, right?
This is your affiliate's coverage.
This is our affiliate.
Okay.
When there's people in Nashville covering it,
right.
They went live. Their anchor was out in the field, and even like the day after, they a red state station, and they are in Nashville, which is a music, I'm sure, a more left leaning city.
Yeah, it's an Austin-y version, or
yeah. There's cool ass people in Nashville. So, but anyway, they didn't gender the shooter. They said the shooter. They said their name as the police gave it, but then they showed a picture of them from their yearbook when they went to the school, which showed them as a little girl. So like that told the story, right? So the news, they didn't use a gender because they didn't know. They said they were a student. They showed their picture. They showed the video of the shooting. You can see what happens now. So they did a great job of kind of telling the story. And like, because there's a story there, the fact that the shooter chose the school they went to, their childhood school. It doesn't take like much of a connection for you to realize there's some kind of trauma there. And if it's just a trauma of like being trans and growing up in a church school and not being recognized, or if it's other things,
be easy.
Like there's all kinds of again, this is a side of TikTok I am more questionable about, but if it is something you're curious about, there's a lot more information there than you'll find on like I can't believe I'm using this word, but mainstream media sites, like
right.
But you know what I'm talking about, like the big networks, the big papers. Like I haven't seen it much there, but you can find some of this on TikTok, and there's information about the school and some history of the school, and it raises a lot of questions about how much trauma this person had.
Let's be clear: none of that in any way, shape, or form is justification or an excuse for the actions of this person.
Yeah.
In any way, shape, or form. That's. But what we are saying is that it just goes to show that it's not. It's clearly not just a random act. You know, this wasn't just a random act of violence. So there is more to be learned because of that.
So,
And therein goes where back to the argument where you say, okay, well, if this is a mental health issue, then there are things to be gleaned from learning more about motive and more about the person. But at the end of the day, if you're not properly funding access to mental health care, then you're not helping. What you're saying is the bigger problem than the guns. So if you refuse to help about the guns and you refuse to help about the mental health care, then, the blood's on your hands too at that point.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of these questions are, again, like we can debate, and professionals debate can what is the cause? What's the greater cause? Mental health? Is it weapons? It's of course it's related, yada, yada. But as far as telling the story, it is both. It is fucking both. It can be many things at once. But
it's absolutely both.
As far as the media and telling the story.
Yes, I'm sorry, I keep derailing you.
No, you're great. Please continue, keep doing it. But I think in this particular story, and why I think this story is important to talk about, because and it's kind of another national discussion that's happening is like kind of criminal justice reform. What does justice mean? A lot of people has been like families of victims' families, of murder people, someone on death row, they die. Like, do you feel justice? They don't feel it. They still don't feel justice. Like some do, some feel some justified, right? Some sense of closure. It's usually closure was what they feel. They feel some sense of closure, but even after some time. Even that's
is closure justice.
So it's like the best way I've heard like what is justice is like keeping it from happening again, right?
I was just thinking as you were saying that, I was like, true justice is being able to say that what happened to you or what you did helped at least one or more people not have to go through that same thing.
Exactly.
And that is justice.
Like the shooter's dead, the shooter's dead. There's going to be, I don't know, probably some kind of trials, of course, but like, not the kind of trial that a family would get closure from, right?
Well, nobody can go on trial.
But I think justice, like what you can do for the people who died is make sure more people don't
aren't getting those guns.
Remember those kids' names, say those kids' names. Because we don't want more names. You don't want to add names to the list. And to me, like that is justice. So when we're thinking about like how do we keep it from happening, you have to think about when it happens, why it happens. And I think that's why it's important to tell the story of the shooter when you're telling the story. And when you're telling a story when it's right as it's happening, again, we want to know what happened, and then we want to know the victims. We want to see, hear their names, hear about them, hear stories about them, see pictures. We get invested in their lives immediately, because when you're like watching in these like highly emotional, intense things, it's tragic. Everyone's got kids in school, friends with kids in school, and so you connect to the story in different ways. Whether you've been in gun violence, whether you are trans or have a trans friend, like this story in particular, you can connect to it in so many different ways. So as storytellers, we need to talk about it in so many different ways. So I think that's why it's important to talk about the shooter. Because also another thing that Nashville did that a lot of stations didn't do. It's interesting when you hear them talk about the dead, they always say six dead in Nashville shooting. The station in Nashville said 7. They included the shooter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
that's very interesting.
Yeah. And and I was watching this as I don't consider myself trans. I consider myself genderqueer, but trans adjacent, right? And I was very affected by the coverage in ways I didn't expect to be once I saw the shooter was trans, because hearing anyone like misgendered is like hard to hear now, and hear someone dead named is hard to hear. Even if it's someone that you have no sympathy for, if it's a fucking child murderer,
right?
It's still hearing them dead named affects me, right? Like,
because I'm not trans, but
there's just a certain trauma when you say you're something and people look at you and say you're not, and then even go against that and like call you your old name, like refuse. There's like such a trauma in that. So like, when we're talking about a shooting, what causes someone to commit a school shooting? That much anger, you have to talk about what's traumatizing them.
I completely get it. When I see, like, okay, my son is now getting mailers from like colleges.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very aware, and I'm very quick to filter through the mail because almost all of them have his dead name.
Yeah.
And I know that if it affects me, seeing it on a piece of mail, just seeing it and reading it, I go, oh my God. And, I feel like I have to protect them from it.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine how much more amplified that feeling is.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling a fraction of that, fraction of that. And it's a lot. It feels, I feel like it's a lot for me in that moment. And it cannot be close to what you or he or any of other people hearing the story can be feeling.
Absolutely.
In the moment.
There's a great conversations being had about, the words we choose and how it affects people, right? And how we cover things, how it affects people. So, like, the best time to do it is like as it's happening, right? So, like,
the most frustrating thing to hear is now's not the time for the conversation.
But even like as a media person, like if there's any media people now, I'm like encouraging you now to please, again, I know the shooter isn't a sympathetic character in the story that you're telling, but if you can just get their gender right, or not, at least don't misgender them, for trans audiences, for friends, family, loved ones, supporters of trans people, that goes a long way. You get respect from an audience, even though it's from a weird angle, right? To be like,
right.
And I felt weird because I was in meetings talking about this very thing, and it felt weird to even remotely be defending a child murderer, a school shooter, right?
Right.
It did feel weird, but obviously
that's not what you're defending.
Yeah, and why? And even the people in our own newsroom were like, well, we say. They were. Everyone was surprised they said 7. It was a bold move to say 7 dead. Even the Today Show.
When you
said
said that, it had not even crossed my mind of that not being, because once you said that, I immediately realized, oh my God, you're right. They always separate it.
Sometimes they'll say always 7 dead and the shooter, or they'll say 6 dead and the shooter.
Correct.
Right? Like
they always separate
them,
it.
But when they like number them, it's like it's separate. Even if they even acknowledge them at all. And I didn't most of this time.
It's very interesting that I never noticed that until you said that. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I realize I'm like hearing every story I've ever heard on the news. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, it's always that way. So that's wild.
Yeah. But I can't help but see the shooter as a victim in this too. And you should never you can't rank victims, right? Like, because the fact is if this shooter, and this is why I think again the shooter story needs to be told, because if this shooter couldn't buy the gun, right? That's one thing for sure. But also, if this shooter was seen by people who loved him, had friends. I saw this is. I'm sorry, I'm getting off on so many tangents.
That's okay.
I saw a soundbite. This is also what's confusing for people. The news they take, and I'm not criticizing. I don't know who this person is, but the news will often just they want to find someone connected to the story, right? So they're taking friends and family, and that friends and family could be like a long time ago, right? So they were talking to a friend of the shooter, and they were saying she. They kept saying she, but they were a friend of the shooter. So it's like, oh, well, they're a friend of the shooter, and they're saying she, right? So again, but this is like a friend who knew them from childhood.
Yes.
So so it says a lot that their friends are still saying she, and because I don't know if it was a new thing. I don't know if he recently started using he him, and if they recently came out. I don't know their story.
Right.
That's why I feel weird talking about some of this, because some of it's not out yet.
Right.
But hearing someone. The news is saying a friend and they're saying she, to me, says a lot about the shooter's life.
Right.
Right? Like, because if they had a few people who saw them, and used their right name, those kids could still be alive. And I'm not saying that that is the one thing. I don't know what other traumas and mental health.
No, you're absolutely right.
But there's so many factors. So they can't buy the gun. Those kids are alive. And if this shooter doesn't have the specific traumas that they had, those kids are alive, and those that has to be talked about. If you're talking about how do we stop the school shootings, you cannot ignore the school shooters because they're at the fucking center of it.
And it goes to I talk about my fascination with true crime. You look at serial killers, and people talk about the glorification of serial killers, and I do believe that is a thing, and it exists. It's out there, and it's not cool.
Yeah,
I don't love that. I think there is a fine line between being able to glorifying them and learning from them.
Yeah.
And I think that because I firmly believe that, and this is a wild thing, but I firmly believe that every monster that's ever been out there at some point in their existence was a sympathetic creature, because at some point they were a child and they were an innocent, and something happened somewhere.
Yeah.
Something happened. And that's where you find out how to stop it happening again.
Absolutely.
So you have to go into who they were.
Absolutely.
You have to look at their story. You have to look at their past. Because if you don't learn why and how they came to be the person able to do something like that, because that's another thing that we always have to remember is that to be able to do something like that, most normal people can't think about doing that.
Can't even imagine it.
So something has to happen to make you capable of even thinking about it, let alone carrying it out.
Yeah.
And that thing is, I firmly believe that most of those things are avoidable.
Yeah.
And can be, if we can find out, where those things start, we can avoid them.
Yeah.
If you can learn enough from it, you can avoid it. And that's important. And so that goes more to also why it's important to tell that story. But while writing that line between telling the story and quote glorifying them.
And it's a fine line, and it's hard to find. And I think that media people, journalists, you got to be bold to at least try to find it, right? You might go too far. You might go too soon. People don't want to hear about this shooter right away. I don't think you should talk about him right away.
But you can't not try.
Yeah, but there's still kind of levels. Find the know your audience. Read the room, right?
Right.
If you're in Tulsa, you're writing for a Tulsa audience. If you're a journalist for the Wall Street Journal, you know your audience. The kind of Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. I do want to take a related but sharp turn because to talk about another angle of this for me. Because what this feels like, and I think that what it doesn't often get looked like, but I think because it was a trans person, for me, it was easy to see it this way. I feel like this was a very public and very angry suicide.
I don't disagree.
It doesn't, everyone, and first of all, I'm going to talk about suicide for a second. And as a person who's depressed, I want to let you know that I'm going to talk about suicide because it's real. Just in hearing it in the news, as a depressed person too, hearing about, seeing this and kind of realizing what this is also, right? I mean, suicide by cop is a real thing.
Yes.
And most school shooters don't expect to get out of it,
Suicide by cop has affected our family directly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's very real.
It's very real. And again, if you're choosing to shoot up a school, you're probably knowing you're dying, right? And
if you leave behind a manifesto, you
exactly.
probably know you're not coming back.
And it should be, and it's hard for some people to see it that way, right? Because they're like, why don't they just kill themselves? They just killed themselves like all these other people, didn't die. But it has to be looked at that way because it's still, I think it's that. And I think with a trans person, it's almost easier to see it that way only because everyone, I think, accepts the fact that the trans suicide rate is incredibly high. Because
absolutely.
That is
terrifyingly high.
That is one of the factors that there's doctors, there's a discussion how are these affecting kids? How are these things affecting kids? And the doctors are like, studies haven't been done about this, but I can tell you that you have to affirm them because when you don't affirm them, they're killing themselves, and it's a health their health risk is suicide.
That's
for a trans
why
kid.
Motherfuckers like Marjorie Taylor Greene are so goddamn dangerous.
Yeah,
they're so fucking dangerous.
Yeah, and you have to it has to be seen as a health. Suicide is a health risk, and these trans youth who aren't seen.
You're absolutely right.
You're
should
pushing
be a
them towards,
medical. It should be an emergency.
So when I see this, I see a person who
excuse me.
Trying to come out as I don't want to assume their story or anything, but from what I've seen in the media, we see this person who identifies as he, him. They've got a new name. They go to their religious school as a child, and
a religious school that might have a very checkered past.
Yeah, and decide to end their life and take out as many people as they can. Right? It's a very public statement. It's a very violent statement. It's a scream as you leave kind of thing. And
you're right.
That shouldn't, I'm not trying to glorify that kind of suicide or anything at all, but you have to look at it honestly, because I do feel and again, if you see it as that, you have to talk about what damaged them. You have to talk about the shooter.
If you're not hearing that scream, then it was
yeah, and that's again to me that's justice, right? Making sure it's not happening. Look at this from every fucking way. If you're not gonna give us restrictions on guns, let's talk about it honestly at least.
If like you said, if that's you said a scream,
scream as you leave.
A scream as you leave. If that scream isn't heard,
Yeah.
then the next scream won't be heard.
Yeah.
And the next scream won't be heard. And
yeah.
until you start hearing that scream and addressing why that person is having to scream as they leave, you can't help. You can't make it,
And here's where it's tricky too as a media person, because I think you also have to admit that telling the story of these people and not glorifying them is challenging, especially to people who are sick, right? When people who are ill and depressed are hearing about a suicidal person, you have to be very careful about what you say.
And let's be
you have
clear,
a responsibility,
right? And let's be clear that therein lies a tricky one. Whereas people like Marjorie Taylor Greene will be very quick to use the word mental illness to describe trans people.
Yeah,
and so no, this is a trans person who also coincidentally had mental illness.
Yeah, because and then most of them do because they're depressed from
they're
not being
terrified
seen.
of being alive.
Yeah, it's PTSD, it's trauma. Yeah.
My son is so scared to be alive.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
To know at any given moment the how much fear he may or may not be in any given situation when he's in public. You know? I'm lucky in that I feel like he feels pretty safe at school for the most part.
That's good.
But it's school. How safe can you feel?
And it's still Oklahoma too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which is, and again, please hug, love, check on your trans friends, because there's a lot of already like hateful talk out there coming from fucking leaders and elected officials too, even. So that
incredibly
that
disgusting and hateful, and the dog whistles are out the window. It's just straight, unfiltered hatred.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
And it's tricky, because I do think the media has to be careful about how much we talk about this, because I kind of agree with, this is where I don't even have an answer. I have a lot of questions and undecided thoughts on this, because the media, one thing we don't do in the news is cover suicides, right? Like we hear call of a body found, we send out a photographer, to go to shoot it. If we get out there and the cops can quickly determine that it was a suicide, the crew's striking, that out. Video never makes air unless something else comes out of it. If that person happened to murder people before they killed themselves, then we're going to use that video and talk about their suicide. But like, if a story is just a person's suicide, like we don't talk about that, right? So when you're talking about was this school shooting a very violent suicide, I think there's a question of how do we cover this, and because you have to cover it, right? Like you have to talk about it for so many reasons. Like the story has to be told. We need to know the victim stories. We have to know what guns are doing to us. We have to know how we're broken. But like, I still think you have to be. I don't know the answer. It's scary, because how do you talk about the shooter and what happened to them and why this happened without other people, broken people, and a lot of us since the pandemic and in general are broken. How do you talk about these things without broken people getting ideas? Honestly, like it's scary, and it's delicate, and
especially when those broken people have nowhere to turn,
but lots of access to guns. Yeah, that's still there, man. That's still like high up there. If you ask again, what would make these kids still be alive, you have to mention guns, and
100%, and that goes back to the lawmakers.
Yeah.
And we had a little bit of a shouting match between Jamal Bowman and Thomas Massey. Thomas Massey from Kentucky, you know him from making the Christmas card with you and your kids and all your weapons of war, making that popular. That very disgusting photo. I'm not going to go too much. Anyways, so Jamal Bowman very passionately was sort of in the faces of, as these congressmen are walking by, there's people, I don't know if they were on a tour or whatever, but there's people there. And he's very loudly letting them know that these people that are walking by that are refusing to take action on gun laws, letting them know that these are cowards, that are being played by the gun lobby.
Yeah.
And Thomas Christmas Card Massey comes up and tries to, and he's got this smug fucking smile on his face when he does it. Like, watch me. in his mind, he knows he's about to win this moment so hard. He knows he's going to win because he comes in and he says, did you know that there's not been one shooting in a school where the teachers are allowed to carry? First and foremost, go fuck yourself forever, Thomas Massey.
Yeah.
Number two, I don't know how many schools there are in the country where teachers are allowed to carry.
Yeah.
But even if that statement is true, you have to know that your sample size is fucking garbage, and using that as an argument against gun laws is a fucking bullshit argument. And very succinctly, Jamal Bowman was very quick to shout back in his face, you are not looking at the numbers, my friend.
Yeah.
States with more guns have more deaths.
Period.
And he just kept repeating it in his face, and it was pretty great because Thomas Massey kept basically trying to say, well, you got to arm the teachers. You got to arm the teachers. More guns equals more death, period. End of story. Those numbers are across the board. You can look at that's one of the beautiful thing about numbers, man, is you can't argue with them. You know what I mean? 2 + 2 will always be 4, no matter how much you want it to be 5, Thomas Massey.
Also, I just want to, again, let me slam on the brakes and just throw this out there because I feel like this has been a heavy episode, and this might be a dark question, but I do want to ask, think about your own high school.
Yes.
How many teachers can you think of? You don't have to give their names.
Sure.
But like, think about your teachers having guns.
Oh,
are you
no.
safe?
Hell no.
Yeah.
Hell no.
No. So fucking no. In my high school, I can't think. There's some. I had some responsible teachers that probably could have had a gun in their desk, locked up, and no one knew about it, right? But God, I had like 4 that would have.
They would have shot kids they didn't like.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a teacher at my school. There's again, man.
No, I'm thinking more of like them just getting dropped. You know, you got clumsy old ladies that have no business with a goddamn gun.
This teacher can't even work the AV cart. You want to give them a loaded weapon?
How many of your teachers were like? I mean, I know there's a lot of younger teachers now, but like I remember there was a lot of like teachers where you're like, you are so old.
Yeah.
What are you still doing this for?
I had again, I'm not.
I feel like I had teachers that were old enough to where if they logistically fired a gun, that their hands would break. The bones, the brittle bones inside their old hands would not be able to do it physically. So safety aside, logistically.
I had multiple teachers who were Vietnam veterans.
They don't need guns at school?
Helicopters would traumatize these guys. And I'm not trying to make fun of them. I'm saying these guys, I cannot, if some of those guys had guns.
It's not a safe situation.
Schools now, have you seen a teacher lately? Have you looked at a teacher and they are wore out. Kids are fucking crazy right now. And they were crazy then. Like your mental health, you're tested. If you're a person who's like been traumatized by war, do you want them in a class of like screaming, shit talking teenagers, dude?
No.
Yeah. With a gun?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Sorry. Fuck that.
So one of the things, and here's what I want to start seeing more of. In debates, just in public interactions with lawmakers that refuse to take action, and that is questions like, and demand real answers for questions like, which is more dangerous, CRT or an AR-15?
Yeah.
Which presents a more present danger to our children? Drag Queen Story Hour or an AR-15?
Yeah.
You know, which is more dangerous to our children? Mm-hmm. A story about Roberto Clemente or a fucking AR-15?
Yeah. Seriously,
what the fuck is with these priorities?
Yeah.
I can't understand it. I cannot understand it. They're Thomas Massey is basically saying, and my wife said it great. She said, "Oh, so now suddenly the teachers can't be trusted to pick the books for the kids, but they can be trusted to carry guns."
Yeah.
You're not responsible. You're not responsible enough to choose the books for your students. No.
Have a gun,
but take this gun and be the good guy with the gun.
Be ready. Be ready to take out a...
Jesus fucking... That's your solution. That's your fucking solution. That's the most cowardly, head in the sand bullshit I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah. They seem really scared, like I always kind of see that.
I mean, they're being held hostage by the gun lobby.
Yeah.
Like metaphorically, probably, I don't know if it's literally. Maybe in every office of every Republican, there's someone from the gun lobby with an actual gun in a closet, and every time they leave, they come out and they go, "You did good. You did good. Yeah. Now I don't have to shoot you, see?"
They just wake up with a note that's like, "We've implanted a device inside of you, and
if you ever vote,
and they look and there's a tiny little slit on their stomach, and they have a minor surgery, and there's like an IV in their arm, and they're like, oh my God.
You will explode if you vote
like
yes
all
for gun
Republicans are
laws.
like doing Speed. It's the movie Speed, but they're just like, they've got to maintain a certain level of shittiness or they explode.
If you vote for reasonable gun laws, you will explode. Jesus Christ. Okay. Let's take a little bit of a turn.
All right.
And in local news,
yes, please.
Did you see the story of the Transformation Church's newest edition?
Okay, no, please tell me, because I just saw I saw the Transformation statement about why they hired this person, but I don't even know.
Can you pull that up by any chance? I would love to see that. Yeah. I have not seen that. So
I don't know if it was a email that I saw, but I'll see if I can find it publicly. I'm sure it's on their website, probably.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, while you do that, I'll just give a brief backstory. There's multiple podcasts and a Discovery Plus documentary about the church Hillsong. Hillsong was a church that kind of pioneered some of the modern mega church strategies. They definitely they got really big for a lot of their music, for their worship music, and of course, with most mega churches, there's a lot of controversy around a lot of the people involved. And one of those is a little gentleman named Carl Lentz. Carl Lentz left the church after admitting to infidelity and basically said, "Oops, cheated on my wife. I'll just resign and everybody will be chill." But then it came out that there's a lot of allegations of sexual misconduct and other abuse and financial stuff. And so, of course, he, basically was in disgrace. I think he went to Florida for a little while. But now he has joined Tulsa's Transformation Church as a strategist. And what else does it say? According to the church's executive pastor, Carl Lentz has joined Tulsa's Transformation Church as a strategist. I don't know, man. Very publicly, it seems like his strategies aren't great.
Yeah, there's their statement. You want me to read this?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is the statement. I guess it's from Executive Pastor Tammy McQuarters. After 2 years of Carl being in his own discovery and healing process, he has shown readiness to use his God-given gifts towards the local church again. We believe in Carl, his marriage, his skill set, and his restoration.
We pray that Carl, Laura, and their family experience not only their own restoration, but help others experience restoration by using their triumphs and failures to create resources for the body of Christ at large. We believe that this is part of what it looks like for the church to be the church.
So are they like swingers? Like, what is it?
First off,
it sounds like they're talking about they're in the lifestyle.
They used the word restoration 3 times, twice in one sentence. 3 times within 2 sentences, twice in the same one.
His skill set. We believe in his skill set.
His skill set is manipulation and grifting. Because these motherfuckers are literally like the righteous gemstones level of yeah, like they're just
That show's so good.
I mean, these motherfuckers have multi-million-dollar mansions. This dude's constantly posting pictures of his $2,000 sneakers and all this shit. Every fucking penny, every single penny comes from the parishioners.
Yeah.
Every penny of it comes from the people that are giving that money so that it can go to the greater Christian good, aka making sure that this douchebag, can you scroll back up to his picture so that this motherfucker can stay in too tight polo shirts and David Koresh glasses. Like he went into iMart Express and was like, give me the Koresh special. No, he didn't go into iMart because those are probably $7,000 frames, I bet.
Yeah.
This piece of shit. I mean, listen to there's the Hillsong documentary on Discovery Plus, and then there's a follow-up that they did. The same people that made that did a podcast that's a follow-up.
All right.
And then there's another one, I think it's called False Prophets. It's either False Prophets. Let me look it up on my podcast list here because I have it on my subscription. Yeah, False Prophets. That's another one that came out on iHeartRadio.
Nice.
And it's also about Hillsong, and they're from former members.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember there being like a movie like in favor of. Wasn't there a movie called Hillsong that was about the church or something?
That might have been the Discovery Plus documentary you were thinking of,
Got
perhaps.
dark. Got darker than that. I remember the trailer.
But well, I don't know. Maybe but there's also this is the guy. Yeah, he baptized Justin Bieber. He's like, he was like celebrity
He's going
pastor.
through some weird stuff right now.
Yeah, he got in a lot of trouble.
Not connecting to anything. I was like, he's like sold all his music and like.
Oh,
Justin
Bieber. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, Bieber. Yeah. No, he had some health problem. I actually felt bad for him.
Yeah.
Like he's got some shit beyond his control that has nothing to do with.
Maybe it was that weird baptism. I'm so sorry.
Oh shit!
He had a faulty baptism.
The bacterias from the dirty baptized water got in his ears, nose, and throats.
Yeah.
And made him. Oh fuck!
Damn, he just solved it. Solving crimes.
This guy's got. Look. Now that's another charge. That's another charge right there. That's gross
Tainted
negligence.
baptism. Is that a real thing? That should be a thing.
Gross negligence, if anything, right? But yeah, this guy is. So now he's in our town, and I don't know if he's going to be like doing this work remotely or if he's going to be physically in this town. But if I have to run into this fucking guy anywhere, it's going to be really hard to not tell him how much he sucks to his face.
Yeah.
Hey, Carl. This is one of my favorite things in the world is like these are the types of dudes that'll say things like literally say things out loud like God spoke to me and said blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Which means that you are supposed to believe that he at some point spoke to God, right?
Yeah.
Which means that God at some point probably said Carl. Could you imagine
Carl?
God. Hey, Carl. I just can't imagine that. That alone makes me know that
God would have used his full name, Carlton.
Carlton William
I do
Lentz.
know your Christian name.
Carlton, too tight of shirt.
We all know you really wear an extra large. Stop buying mediums.
Listen, I mean, when I don't want to be judgy, but like when I look at a guy that looks like that, I think one thing, and that is it's very likely that he has some very predatory behavior. And based on the accusations, he is very, very predatory towards women.
Kind of looks like Justin Timberlake a little bit in the face.
Justin Limbersnake? That's his alter ego, Justin Limbersnake.
That's the Tulsa alternate universe, Justin Timberlake.
Oh, God. This guy sucks.
Man, we keep
This is so funny. File. Carl Lentz appears during an interview October 23rd, 2017 in New York. Lentz, the pastor from global megachurch Hillsong, who once ministered to Justin Bieber and a bevy of other celebrities and sports stars, has been fired. He acknowledges on Instagram that he cheated on his wife, but he didn't acknowledge all the other nasty shit he did. Yep. And then not only so that he's just one of the guys that has nasty shit around Hillsong.
Right.
So there's worse stuff with Brian Houston, I think. I can't remember. I'm forgetting. But watch the doc. Listen to the pods.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it.
It's insane. But yeah, basically, if you are in the Tulsa area and are a rational-minded person, stay the fuck away from Transformation Church.
Be careful eating that Savastanos.
Because they're
go.
basically saying to your face, like, yeah, we're really only interested in getting more of your money, and he knows how to get more of your money by pandering and doing all the formulaic pop pastor bullshit.
Yeah.
And so we can better swindle you if we hire Carl Lentz. I mean, that's the only reason you hire a motherfucker like him. Yeah, that's his God-given skills that they're talking about.
Yeah. His skill set.
This sucks.
Yeah, dude.
It's another embarrassment for
Tulsa's
Tulsa.
got a lot of super villains.
We're like a fucking sanctuary city for shitheads.
Yeah. I was really hoping never mind. I was going to say I was really hoping Trump was going to get arrested here in Tulsa.
Oh, while he was here? Oh, that would have been
because it was
so
all
great.
kind of coming down at the same time.
Yeah.
Just how cool would that have been? Like,
it would have been cool.
Like Red State Donald gets arrested in the very stadium he was embarrassed in.
I also like to picture the moment where he got off the plane and realized it wasn't a WWE wrestling event, but like boring college wrestling.
Yeah. Also,
speaking of, I think we might have gotten a little bit more insight as to why that arrest in Manhattan hasn't happened yet, or at least the indictment.
Okay.
And that is they brought in this week. They brought in my favorite last named National Enquirer guy, David Pecker.
Old Dave Pecker.
Old Davey Pecker. They brought him in because now the DA is looking into the payment for Karen McDougal, the one that happened around the same time. And David Pecker had I think larger role in that one than he did the Stormy Daniels one. And so him coming in and testifying, if he is not, that's probably not good. So they're probably looking at maybe adding some charges. And it's
thick.
Yeah, and it very well could be that he's there may be a little bit of Alvin Bragg trying to give a little bit of time for his case to not be the first indictment to come down.
Yeah.
Because there is there is a lot.
Want to jump in here?
There is a lot to say about this case being the first one to come down, because while it is
seems the least serious.
I keep hearing people say it's the weakest case. It's not the weakest case because that's misleading. That they have a super strong case.
Yeah.
It's just the least serious crime.
Yeah.
It's not the weakest case. It's the least serious crime he's being accused of. I definitely would like to see the Georgia indictment come first because trying to overthrow the will of the people is a little bit worse.
Yeah. Like actual proof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what he did in Manhattan, yes, it's a crime to commit business fraud and mislead, and do those things. And if there was campaign stuff involved, then that does become more than a misdemeanor. But at the end of the day, we're looking at possibly a misdemeanor, maybe a felony, and not a very serious one when it comes to the hush money payments. Yeah. It's still a crime. And Jon Stewart's been fucking killing it lately. Nice. But he was on an interview with, I think, Preet Bharara, maybe, where he was being asked about, should they bring charges? And, he basically just boiled it down to the raw, of course you bring charges when a crime is committed, because the second you don't bring charges when a crime is committed, the whole system is fucking broken.
Totally.
You cannot say this is too big or this isn't big enough. Yeah. You cannot do that. Yeah. Then if you do that, you're admitting that the whole fucking thing is bullshit.
Yeah.
So you have to do it. But and the shitty thing is having to look at the optics, the politics, the likelihood of this and that and blah, blah, blah. And that shouldn't matter. It shouldn't
So
matter when you're talking about a former president who committed crimes, who's basically been committing crimes his whole goddamn life. But he committed some pretty fucking serious ones,
like
in the name of the presidency. And Jesus fuck.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's wild.
It is.
But yeah, the DA bringing those in might be a little bit of insight as to why that case hasn't happened yet.
Interesting.
But come on, Fani Willis. That's the Georgia DA.
Okay.
That's the one that could bring the case with the.
There's been like little interesting bits
Georgia
like here and there
probe.
coming out of that, right? From like jurors and stuff like that. Right?
Yeah, well, and you've got the.
It was like the new. I heard about a new phone call or something recently. They've got like.
Yes,
so
I believe there was another phone call with
evidence keeps dropping.
Raffensperger.
I think so.
Brian Kemp or Raffensperger, one of the two.
Yeah.
But and then you also have I think we briefly touched on it last week that the federal judge said that the executive privilege claim for Scavino and Meadows and Stephen Miller and all those motherfuckers, that it's not going to hold water. And that should hopefully, because Trump's trying to appeal that, and that should hopefully be shot down relatively quickly. Because of the way executive privilege claims are clearly laid out in the writing of the Constitution, or I don't know if it's the Constitution, but it's clearly laid out that whoever is sitting in the seat of the presidency gets to decide whether or not at any given moment something can be, basically Biden can say, okay, what happened at this point, or whatever, the executive privilege claim is, I'm not going to hold it up or whatever. It's the president currently in power. So the only way that he could do it is if he was still the president.
Oh, okay.
So, and he can't do that. So it should be shot down relatively quickly.
All right.
And hopefully, I don't know if it's something that could be taken up by the Supreme Court. But if they do, then it's a whole nother bag of fucking dog shit.
Which I feel like is what he's doing. He's just trying to like lobby.
Well,
like,
it's always
like,
delay.
Kick
It's
all these to the Supreme Court.
Appeal, delay, file motions. That's his whole thing, and he'll try and do it until he dies of heart failure or whatever the fuck takes him out. But as long as, and here's the thing, if he can kick the can down the road long enough for him to not see jail before he dies, I'll be okay with that as long as that motherfucker never sees the presidency again or any elected office again. If all that comes from any of this is that he cannot hold office again,
that's great.
That's justice, at least a little. It's not justice like we deserve and like the country deserves, but
I think there was some hope, I know, by even Republicans like Liz Cheney and whatnot, that like some of this, like revealing who Donald really was and like proof and the actual arrest on this stuff would like convince some of the people who had been like misinformed and like some of the really
it sure doesn't seem like it.
Can we bring them back with this?
They just did a poll and 75% of Republicans say that if he's indicted for any of these crimes, that it should not disqualify him.
Yeah, he should still be able to run for trying to steal an election.
75%.
Yeah,
say that.
Give him another go. Give him another.
Shouldn't disqualify him.
Yeah.
Could you fucking imagine if that was Barack Obama?
Oh my god. When Barack Obama came to Oklahoma, I saw this in a Facebook memory recently. There was no Oklahoma official went to visit him, or like how they go to the airport and like
and like how GT Bynum went and fucking cheesed out for
Jerry
Trump.
Askins, who was like 2 lieutenant governors ago, was like, welcome to Obama. Like, who's our top Democrat?
Jesus Christ.
Someone from 12 years ago. Okay, go say hi to Obama. So yeah, but like if Obama had done any of those,
it'd be like 99.999% say it should disqualify him from office.
Oh, absolutely.
But now 75% of Republicans are straight up chill with it. Yikes, you guys. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah.
Stop. Get help.
Did you
PSA, don't go to Russia.
Oh, yeah.
If
Wall
you're
Street
American,
journalist.
do not go to fuck. And this is like we say it somewhat jokingly, but like literally they're targeting Americans to use as bargaining chips because Vladimir Putin now sees American citizens as poker chips, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
And that's super fucking dangerous, and especially journalists. From everything I've read about, so his name is Aaron Gershkovich, and everything I've read about him, he's a Russian speaker. He's been covering Russia for a long time for the Wall Street Journal, and Russia is claiming that he was attempting to obtain top secret classified information. And we have nothing to back that up other than their word. But as we've seen with people like Paul Whelan and Brittany Griner, that we won't see evidence. We will see a speedy trial that will lack any real evidence, and their conviction rate, I might be speaking out of turn here, but I believe it's well over 90%. And that's fucking terrifying if you're an American citizen. So, the idea of Americans who for any reason have to work over there, be it in journalism or business or, obviously for oil and gas or whatever, whatever may bring them to having to be there, not, necessarily wanting to be there. Man, I hope they can find a way out. It's so scary to think of being an American in Russia right now.
You're going to be a prisoner of war. That's
you're
going to be
so fucking scary.
He's a war criminal, and you think he doesn't give a shit. He's
Fuck no.
Do what he wants to do.
Yeah, he's reached the point of scorched earth almost.
Oh yeah,
so
that's even more terrifying to me.
Absolutely,
this is not a guy who's going to give up in any way, right? It's.
I know we're worried about
darkest of the news,
and we're worried about drag queen story.
Yeah.
We might get nuked by fucking crazy ass Vladimir Putin. Jesus, I hope someone in his circle takes him out. Like a boy can dream, right?
It's gonna make
Santa,
how fucking badass was that?
Santa, for Christmas, I was hoping that you could murder Vladimir Putin. That's my one Christmas wish. Please.
I'm a little creeped out right now.
I'm so sorry. Dear Heavenly Baby Father Jesus, please murder Vladimir Putin in his sleep. Save us all.
Yeah, I want
show us your existence.
I want a cool ninja attack, and no one knows where these ninjas came from.
Ooh, just a throwing star just comes from nowhere during a press conference.
Yeah.
Ooh,
a shadow.
So
just
good.
A shadow. I saw a shadow.
Just a shadow, and then a lot of blood.
We need Vladimir Putin to kill John Wick. So anything John Wick loves, whatever. What's the fourth one about now? What did John Wick do?
I haven't seen the fourth one yet, but I imagine it's like, Mr. Putin, they have killed his parakeet. John Wick is coming for us. Pay that man his money. Yikes. That's super scary. I feel fucking, jokes aside, I feel awful for that guy's family.
Oh, man.
Obviously for
terrifying.
him, could you fuck, trying to think of being in a Russian prison.
Yeah.
Is like, I get like sweaty thinking about going to regular jail here. You know what I mean? Like the idea of like, oh fuck, like I had to go to jail for whatever. I've never been. Hopefully never will. I've never been. And when I picture trying to be in or try to picture being in there, I get physically like weird. I like sweat. I'm like, oh God, I think I would last like 10 minutes and then would hang myself. I don't know, like I would give up. I would
it's
it's so scary.
It's like a fear of prison or small spaces or Well, it sounds like an arachnophobia kind of,
and having the shit kicked out of you like day
just
in
like
and
all
day
the
out.
scary things. Yeah,
Yeah, I feel like every bad thing that happens to like new fish would be me because I'm so scared. And they'd be like, "I'm taking all your honey buns. You ain't never getting any magazines."
Is that strictly an American prison thing? Is that like the prison culture in other countries? Like
I bet there's definitely
gang
parallels
fights and girlfriends and like
commissary, man. Like that's the currency in American jails, and I wonder, like shit like
because I do picture that when I think American
ramen
jails.
noodles and honey buns, bro. That's cash money.
Yeah,
cigarettes.
Yeah.
Now it's like vapes, probably.
Oh yeah,
I don't think you can smoke in jail somewhere.
Yeah, it's vapes. There was some kind of bust recently, and they showed like all the shit that was getting smuggled in. It's pretty impressive. They get pretty inventive.
Respect.
Give these guys engineering jobs out of prison. Yeah.
No, that's fucked
Come out
up.
with a good skill set. They'll get hired by a church in town.
Yeah, right. Show your God-given skills. You can go to Transformation Church. Show your restoration. Well, did you have an album pick this week?
I
need a second?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go first. As you heard coming in, I was listening to a little bit of Huey Lewis in the News. I've always loved Huey Lewis in the News since I was a little kid.
Sports, baby.
It's one of those things. Yeah, sports and four. I'm going to give you two of them. Sports and four, back to back. Those are such good albums. I love the acapella Huey Lewis songs. I remember this is years ago. I was talking to somebody about how much I loved the acapella Huey Lewis songs, and they were like, "Oh, you'll love Pentatonics." And I was like, no. That's not the same.
What?
I was like, is Huey Lewis in Pentatonics? Then no. Oh, dang. God. I don't know if you guys could hear that over the mics, but that was
intense.
Loud clap of thunder that's telling us to wrap this shit up.
Every time you say Huey Lewis.
But yeah.
Sky breaks.
Christian Bale's The Thing in American Psycho. I don't remember if that's part is in the book.
Yeah.
But those albums are really fucking good.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, they're, know, I went through a phase where I like unironically loved Huey, and then I had to ironically love Huey, and then I realized, fuck that. No, I just love Huey.
I love Huey.
And I don't give a fuck, and I always will, and I don't care. He's awesome.
Huey Lewis and the Maximum News.
Oh, why have I never thought of that?
It's your fan art.
Huey Lewis and the Max News, making it tomorrow.
Hell yeah.
What'd you get?
For me, like this has been a heavy news week, so often I look for music just to kind of like chill and calm. So I went to the ambient king Brian Eno from 1983. It's Apollo album that was all about the like fucking moon and the space thing. So like it's just fucking beautiful, dude. Like the whole thing. I don't know if you've ever gotten into Eno's like more stuff like it's instrumental stuff, but like
Brian Eno.
Yeah, Brian Eno. Apollo is the album. It's from 1983. The whole thing, dude. Just put it on, let it play, and it is just like a good, nice like vibe. You know what I mean? Like it's a great like again.
Something
if the
for when it's rainy and stormy.
Dude, yeah, when it's rainy, stormy,
like right now apparently.
Yeah, just do your favorite self care and. Put on Apollo
your
vibe.
favorite medication, as it were.
Yeah, it's good.
Nice.
Stuff.
All right, awesome. Well, we're getting out of here before the tornadoes take us out, and for everybody else, we'll see you next week. Psych! We said see you next week, but wow, okay, we literally put our headphones down. And P.S. postscript.
Yeah.
As we were wrapping up, we got our answer as to whether or not Alvin Bragg was going to wait around for Fonnie Willis.
For shit.
Answer is no. Trump has been indicted by the New York grand jury. Officially, Donald Trump has been indicted. As we are obviously about let's see, what time are we? We are 4:55 p.m. Central Time is when we're coming to you recording this.
Here's three headlines that have hit already. Washington Post: Trump indicted by New York grand jury, first ex-president charged with crime. The AP: lawyer says Trump indicted, first ex-president charged with crime, and New York Times, who NBC said was the first to come out with it, I think, said grand jury votes to indict Donald Trump in New York.
Mr. Trump will be the first former president to face criminal charges. The precise charges are not yet known, but the case is focused on hush money payments to porn star during the 2016 campaign.
Yeah, record day.
They're saying that it'll take a couple of days for it to be processed, and then they will figure out his basically turning himself in, hopefully early next week. So
it's going to be an intense week.
Wow. Holy shit. That thunder we were hearing was the storm coming for old Don.
Oh man. What if it was like at that exact time?
I mean, that would have been insane. Yeah. You know what I'll need to do is I'll need to try and timestamp when we were recording, when the thunder hit.
With MSNBC.
That's right. And when old Nicole Walrus chimed in. And we call her that totally lovingly. We adore Nicole Wallace. So Nicole Walrus is not meant to be anything other than a fun play on the name Wallace. So this is wild. Obviously, we hope this does not lead to any violence from the whatever you want to call the Trump fringe militias, the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, the Gravy Seals.
Like straight up called for violence recently, didn't he?
He said death and destruction would come if he was indicted.
Yeah.
He literally said death and destruction will come.
Which that probably is going to be its own charge eventually.
And one thing we didn't even mention, one thing we didn't mention on the show is the fact that we're rapidly coming up on the 30-year anniversary of Waco. Wow. And there's been a lot of talk about how there's been, talks of violence on that day.
Yeah.
And so this could very much potentially amplify that, which is scary. And could you imagine the thing that blows my mind is, we talked about the idea of what would drive you to be able to commit violence on another human being? Yeah. Right. And what could make you snap into that, over that line of being, of us, where we are now not being able to think about doing that to somebody, not being like, we can't fathom shooting somebody, even in self-defense. Really, it's hard to think about. Right. And so to be able to wrap your head around being driven to violence in defense of Donald Trump fucking Stormy Daniels and paying to keep the world from knowing before the 2016 election, because he didn't give a fuck if Melania knew. He didn't give a fuck about Melania. No. He wouldn't have fucked Stormy Daniels while she was pregnant while his wife was pregnant, while Melania was pregnant. Yeah. And that's when this happened. So,
it's just weird.
The idea of putting,
because this guy who did a crime got arrested.
This guy and this crime, and that's what you're gonna do. Jesus Christ, where are you? Where's your mind?
Yeah, it's scary, but also, progress. I don't know. It's gonna be an interesting.
It's gonna be a wild fucking week. Is all we can say. So we will. We will try and organize a time to get a recording in before next weekend, because I know next weekend we're both going to be unavailable on the weekend.
Heck yeah.
So we'll try and maybe get in something during the week next week, because obviously there's going to be stuff we're going to want to cover. So.
And thanks for listening. Thanks for sticking through this whole
Absolutely. We love you, and I mean it for real this time. Goodbye. Maximum News is a production of OLA Ministries. All original music written, performed, and recorded by Kins.